Rochelle, thanks for coming back on my podcast.
Hey Shaun, thanks for having me on the podcast.
So today we are delving into the origins of our favourite holiday,
Halloween.
Halloween. So you and I have both done a little bit of research. I feel educated.
Yes, I feel very educated about the issues. I feel like I have a point of view, you know?
Indeed I do. So, Halloween, what did we learn? When did it first begin?
I mean, that's a really tough one because Halloween has, I think, roots in so many different festivals. Like, that was something I learned when I researched it. Did you find the same thing?
I did. What I found really interesting was the Celtic tribes that celebrated their version of it and what it used to be back then.
Yeah. So Samhain was the Celtic one, and it's spelt Samhain. And we were just talking about this before we started recording. So I always knew from what it looked like. I knew how it's spelled, and I was pronouncing it for the past 20 years, Samhain. And I've discovered this week I was this year's old when I learned that it was Samhain. Which is bad.
And we realized that I was the opposite in the fact that I always knew how to pronounce it, but I never knew how it was spelt.
So that's funny. That's one of those little funny things. But I think a lot of people are aware of that particular one. Samhain is a really popular one that gets referenced when everyone's like, Halloween is not an American festival. Halloween came from this Celtic, pagan holiday. That's the one that we always hear about. The one I didn't know about, though, was Lemuria.
Yes, I didn't know about this one either. So this one kind of got taken over by the church as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this one was a festival from the Roman pagans, and it actually celebrated their dead, and it happened on May 13th. It happened on May 13th. So in their calendar, on May 13th, they would celebrate Lemuria, and the larvae, which was, what they called the souls of the dead, would be more likely to walk the earth that day. So to appease them, they used to pour milk on the graves and leave out little soul cakes for them. But in 1609 AD, the church came and took that over, and it moved that holiday. They turned it into All Saints' Day, and they moved it to November 1st, which was directly after Samhain.
And they did that to, so they say they did that to, the Christian church did that in order to be able to, convert pagans a little bit easier, because they rather than taking away anything from the pagan beliefs and the pagan holidays, they sort of rebranded.
Yeah, they did. It was a rebrand. The Christians were onto that first. Jesus came back from the dead. Rebrand. Son of Christ, rebranding, okay? So, that was their whole vibe. Rebranding, very popular with the Christians.
Yes, so they rebranded Lemuria into All Saints' Day, which All Saints' Day was, what did we say, November 1st? And then that eventually got rebranded as well. All Saints' Day became All Hallows' Day.
Yes.
And of course, that being November 1st means that 31st of October was All Hallows Evening, which became All Hallows Even, which then became Halloween. And then the church added another day, which was the 2nd of November, and that was All Souls' Day.
Yes.
What was that all about? All Souls' Day was to honor not just the saints, but all Christians that had departed.
Yeah. And so with that tradition, the church then brought in this kind of, because they had this whole thing, right, in the Christian church, in the Catholic church and stuff at that time, they talked a lot about purgatory, and the fear was that your loved ones were stuck in purgatory. So purgatory is this awful place between heaven and hell, and you basically are stuck, I guess, waiting for judgment in purgatory. But if you prayed enough for them, then those souls might be able to ascend to heaven. So they called for people to do a lot of prayers for All Souls' Day, which then translated into a tradition that was kind of an early kind of forebearer for trick-or-treating, and that was going souling.
Yes, and when people would go souling, they would go to somebody's house, they would knock on the door, and they would offer to pray for that family's loved ones who potentially were in purgatory, and they would get cakes in return.
Yeah, soul cakes, which are like little spice cakes with raisins in them. And so that was kind of one of those, food for prayer. Food for prayer.
Food for prayer.
Yeah.
I thought. And I'm down for soul cakes because they sound really good.
They sounded good. I mean, I want a soul cake. But it's strange. We're talking about these really early festivals and these early religious rites that were worked into previous pagan festivals as a way for the pagans to adopt it a little bit easier. And yet we know Halloween to be this like fun, rambunctious night where everyone cuts loose, puts on costumes, eats a shit ton of candy, and, goes around causing trouble. So, I mean, how did it get to there? Too much?
Just enough. I was really struggling to keep up with you.
I'm sorry.
I feel like we should let the listeners know I might be quite hungover.
It's quite possible that Shawnee here had a very big evening.
It was not a Halloween.
You've got red on me.
I've got red on me.
For the listeners listening to the podcast, we are also recording this one, and it's going to go out on YouTube, both on my channel and on Shaun's channel. And you can definitely go check that out. Shaun is dressed as Shaun of the Dead, and he looks fabulous.
I've got red on me.
You do have red on you.
Yes.
And I just want to know, Shaun, do you want to play? Yeah, I'm dressed as Chucky, guys. It's a gender swap Chucky, and this was a zero waste costume.
Which, shameless little plug, is what your podcast was about this week.
That's right.
And
yeah.
Thrifty
Halloween. Yes.
And it is worth noting that my costume too was thrifty.
It is thrifty, and I love that you've sort of, you've put that together, and it's fun, and it's a nod, and I'm loving it.
Boom.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about costumes and the origins of Halloween, the origins of Halloween costumes.
Yes, a very interesting topic. What did you find in your research on this one? Because I found varying kind of sources.
Yeah, look, I found varying things. One of the things that I found really interesting was so people, there was no store-bought costumes. Everything was made homemade. And what I found really interesting was when a company actually started to, I guess, make the first costumes, and they were made out of paper.
Yeah.
Which...
When I saw that, and then it turns out, because they were paper costumes, guys, so many children went alight. Like, they got lit on fire. This was the night where people were lighting fires, having those jack-o'-lanterns with the candles in them back then, and people were just, catching fire all over the place because of their paper costumes. It was so fucking unsafe.
So unsafe. Health and safety would have had a field day, but just... yeah, guys, it's just if you are planning on wearing a paper costume this year, just remember it's flammable.
Yeah, stay away from the candles, okay? You're wearing a paper costume, maybe get a tea light, fake candle, battery-powered candle for your jack-o'-lantern, okay?
Also reusable.
Reusable. Love it.
I feel like we've jumped ahead.
We have, but getting back to costumes, something that they did do on All Hallows Eve in the Middle Ages, when it had started to become established as All Hallows Eve because of All Hallows Day and All Saints Day, one thing they were doing in the Middle Ages was beggars would take that as an opportunity to get a little bit rambunctious, have a few drinks, dress up in costumes, and go door to door performing little plays. So that was one instance of costumes happening earlier.
And, a lot of those rambunctious homeless types, when they weren't going and performing their little plays, they were seizing the opportunity to cause mischief, and that was another reason for them to wear masks and costumes, was to hide their identity, I guess, so they don't get into trouble.
Yes, and there was also a little bit of the mask part of Halloween, and that mischief part was partly adopted from the Guy Fawkes Day.
See, I love Guy Fawkes Day, being a good English boy like I am.
I didn't know about it, and when I spoke to Daniel about it, he actually mentioned that here in Australia they used to do Guy Fawkes Day. We never did Halloween, but we did Guy Fawkes Day. This was so before my time, I had no concept of it. I was like, what, really?
Well, my other half, Benny, he often talks about, he doesn't call it Guy Fawkes Day here, but he often talks about the fact that they used to do kind of like a bonfire night.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
And of course, Daniel and Benny probably attended the same ones when they were little people. But yeah, it's really interesting. And then Benny he says that once they sort of banned, you know, the I want to say firecrackers, but I don't think we call them firecrackers. But once they banned like fireworks and those sorts of things here, he said that tradition just started to die out. Whereas in England, it's such a big thing. Like, when Benny and I went up to England a couple of years back, we arrived at the start of November, and one of the first things we did is we went to my friend's house, stayed with her and her partner, and we went to a bonfire night. And Benny was, I guess, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but he was excited by the fact that the entire community got together on like the school grounds, like the big school oval, and there was a giant bonfire, and he was just so thrilled by the fact that it was such a huge community thing. And it's always been that. So Guy Fawkes Night, you know, I've got to say, up until probably 10 years ago, I wasn't really that aware of the history of Guy Fawkes. Like, growing up in England, you learn about it and they teach you about it, but they don't really go into any detail. And it's actually a really interesting story. So Guy Fawkes was what they called a pro-Catholic terrorist.
Yeah.
And he went to blow up the House of Lords with 36 kegs of gunpowder.
That's a fuck ton of gunpowder.
It's so, like, I mean, less than that probably still would have got the job done.
Yeah.
So maybe he was setting himself up for failure there.
Maybe a little bit.
But anyway, so he was actually tried, found guilty, and then the story goes that he was hung, drawn, and quartered, and the pieces of him were then thrown into the fire. And then on the following year of the anniversary of November 5th, touched your leg. And every year since, they mock the memory of Guy by building bonfires and putting, a lot of the times they'll put an effigy of a burning man in there. And,
That's dark
communities
shit.
Get together to burn people.
Yeah, look,
it's the English way.
It is the English way. We won't even get into the Spanish Inquisition because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. But seriously, you guys got a problem. Like, all of the burnings and like the thing, just cut it out. Cut it out.
Look, it was a different time.
It was. That was interesting how that kind of, because it was so close to Halloween, those traditions kind of mixed in, and really Guy Fawkes Day coming to the Americas was part of what solidified the Halloween traditions and what it would later become to be the Halloween that we think of it as now.
I'm just looking at my notes. I'm looking at my notes, okay? I'm really tired.
Well, somebody had too much fun last night now, didn't they?
Yeah. What time did I go to bed this morning?
I don't know.
6:30.
Guys, I had a green juice and went to bed at 9 p.m, so I feel great.
I don't feel great. Right, where am I? Who am I? That's a better question.
Who are you? Who am I?
I can't even read my own writing today. Alright, so Halloween, Guy Fawkes Night. This bit's obviously being edited out onto the audio.
So how does Halloween come to America?
Halloween came to America because the Puritans of New England, they actually tried to prevent Halloween. So when Halloween came to America, it was essentially, I guess it was always kind of there, but it wasn't the Halloween that everybody is familiar with today. And then after the Civil War, there were a lot of, the Scots and the Irish. They went to America, land of the free and Brave New World and all of that business, where they took their own traditions. And that's when the Puritans of New England tried to prevent Halloween before it began in the New World. but then those traditions of Guy Fawkes Night, and I guess the Samhain, and then the church with their rebranding, all made its way to America, and that was when it started to become, I guess, what they would call, at this point it wasn't commercialized, but I guess that's the start of the origin of Halloween that people are familiar with. I remember growing up in WA, I'm sure my listeners don't know who the fuck I am. Like, I grew up in England, I grew up in WA.
He's just changing it, like, depending on whether it suits his story. Don't believe him, the accent's a lie.
I'm actually not from here. But growing up in WA, I found it really funny because my mum loves any opportunity to get dressed up. She embraces the fun spirit side of Halloween. And in the 90s, it was very much like you would have a lot of, I guess, negativity towards kids that were trick-or-treating because it was deemed this commercialized
Americanized
holiday. But it, if you actually delve into those, the pagan history of it all, it's actually not American, and it didn't become American until
really the 19th
later.
Century. From the late 1800s forward is when America adopted it to the degree that we sort of see it now, and it was really the traditions of trick-or-treating and stuff were very much a 20th century American thing.
When I was doing the research, I found it really interesting that the phrase trick-or-treat it's a really young phrase.
Yes.
It's actually less than 100 years old. Which I had no idea.
No, I didn't either. I assumed that was something that had held over. And I think because obviously Halloween's very different to what it used to be, but it has connections to basically festivals that align to autumn ending and, kind of winter coming. And any country...
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming. No, it's not that kind of podcast. Any country that has, proper weather and they harvest stuff, they're going to be more aware of that, and they're probably going to mark that with celebrations. It makes a lot of logical sense that there were so many different cultures that celebrated that end of autumn, beginning of winter, and that celebrated spring with an equinox, and all of those things. We know so many of those traditions and those festivals that we have now, and those holidays that are linked to Christianity, to be adapted from paganism, and it's a result really of watching the seasons change.
What she said.
That.
Yeah. So, as we were saying before, a lot of people think of Halloween as a very Americanized tradition. One of the things that I found really interesting doing the research was the part about the Civil War. And that was sort of, I guess, where America got this fascination with ghost stories.
Yes.
And that's so basically in 1865 the Civil War ended, and there were over 500,000 people that died, which a lot of them were, I guess, nobody knew where they died or how they died or if they died. So there was this fascination after the Civil War of people telling stories about missing loved ones coming back. And that kind of is, I don't want to say it's the origin of ghost stories, because I think ghost stories have been around as long as people have been able to tell stories. But that was, I guess, when America really started to get spooky.
Well, I think they embraced the connection that Halloween and All Saints' Day had to the dead and the veil between the living and the dead being at its thinnest, and this old world belief that did come from Samhain. And if it's at its thinnest, if this is the night where your loved ones who have disappeared, possibly most likely dead, might come home just for the night, there's a very comforting kind of aspect to believing in that and embracing that.
So after the Civil War, Scots and the Irish, we showed up.
You are trouble causers. I have to say, guys, Scots and Irish people coming to America, they definitely brought the trouble with them.
Yeah, and you know what? If you go to Ireland or Scotland, and I say Scotland because of my stepdad, but I've never been there, but I have been to Ireland, They're troublemakers.
I'm sure they are.
But after the Civil War, a lot of the Scots and the Irish, they moved to America, and they brought their own traditional Halloween with them, which I guess, you know, they had that more traditional, more historical points of view when it came to Halloween. And one of the things that the Scots had, and I didn't know this, but one of the things that the Scots had, they are the creators of the boogeyman.
Yeah, and they called it a bogey, didn't they?
Yes.
That was bizarre. I was
Which,
like,
you know what makes
boogeyman.
sense to me though, because there's always been this thing growing up where I was like, is it, some people would refer to it as a boogeyman and some people would refer to it as bogeyman.
Okay, no one referred to it as bogeyman here in Australia, but sure. Sure, British boy.
It was just confusing, but now it makes sense. So they were called a bogey and essentially a boogeyman, and they would torment and terrorize kids. So yeah, they're the monster under the bed that everybody knows, essentially. So yeah,
and the gate, the turnstile thing.
That
was really interesting, and such a symbolic belief to carry forward, because entrances to homes have been protected in so many different ways in different cultures. You know, like the Greek people had the evil eye that would be placed over that ornament, and a lot of people believe that there is a significance to allowing evil into the home. So anytime it's about breaching the actual border of your home and your hearth, there's a lot of superstition about evil coming across and how much more at risk you are to that evil if it breaches your home.
Believe me, my home was breached by evil a long time ago. It's troublesome times, guys. Another story, and I really want you to tell this story, if you want to, of course, and I found this fascinating, was the origins of jack-o'-lantern.
I know, I loved this. I was like, oh my god, really? So, we've got a little...
listeners, I am lighting up the jack-o'-lantern.
And for the viewers,
here it is. And if you're not viewing, you can find the video on both of our YouTube channels.
Yep, so that is Trace to Soy TV and...
Excuse me, I have something to say. That's
right. So the origins of the jack-o'-lantern I found really fascinating, and it came from... Was that Scottish or an Irish belief?
Hold on, let me check my notes.
I feel like it might have been Irish. Or maybe it was just generally Europe.
American.
It was American.
Yep, running with that and saying that. It was
American.
American.
It was an American belief. I really think it came from Europe, but sure.
I mean, most things came from Europe.
Everything comes from Europe. Like, colonializers just colonializing everything. Anyway, so the whole jack-o'-lantern thing is really fascinating because it came from basically a fable about this guy called Jack, and he was also called, I think...
Oh, you know what? Maybe he was Irish because his last name was O'Lantern. Jack O'Lantern.
That is terrible, okay? That is the worst joke you've ever made on your podcast. And it's a pun, so Daniel's going to love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so his name was Jack, and he was a really bad troublemaker. He was so bad that the fable says that the devil kicked him out of hell.
But devil being a nice guy.
As he is. He was like, look, I'm going to take a little bit of pity on you. Here's a single ember. And Jack takes this ember and he puts it in a hollowed out turnip, and that's his lantern that he lights his way when he walks, you know, through earth of the evening, because that's what he did. He just was, doomed to walk the earth at night with this lantern. So Jack's lantern. And that's why all these little Irish kids used to make these hollowed out turnips and put a candle inside them, and it was supposed to ward away evil. When the tradition came to America, though, they were like...
America went, we're going to do bigger and better.
Yeah, they did. They were like, we can make it bigger, we can make it better, we can make it huge. Okay, we had the best.
Make America great again with pumpkins.
Well, it is orange, so I feel like that's on point. And if any listeners are in America...
It's orange and terrifying.
It's orange and terrifying and fake. So, I mean, it's exactly Donald Trump, but...
He's looking at you, Trump.
Yeah, but they took that and they went, there's a whole bunch of pumpkins around here. Let's just, let's hollow out the pumpkins, which were much bigger and better, so that made a lot of sense.
And harvested around Halloween.
Exactly.
You know?
And now it's this iconic thing that we associate with Halloween.
And like Donald Trump, they are orange.
Yes.
However, iconically, orange and black would be the Halloween colours.
Yes, that's right.
Which were not really even associated with Halloween until the 20th century, when artists took all of those, I guess, iconically scary things, you know, witches and ghosts and
black cats.
Yeah, and they I guess branded it with the colours orange and black.
Yeah, it was unified, and the people underestimate how much importance branding basically, but imagery has to how we remember things and how we associate with them. So artists have like a lot to answer for in history as far as how we're associating different colours or shapes with different holidays.
Now, Rochelle, what about the, when we were doing the research, we were speaking about this before, some of the, well, I guess talking about America taking something and making it bigger and better, some of the pranks that these guys were getting up to.
They got worse. I was so amazed to discover this. So we think of Halloween now as being this night where kids go out and they put in a little costume, you walk them door to door, they get pre-wrapped candies, and, you know, they say trick or treat, which is super cute. But, you know, yeah, that's right. Exactly like that. And, yeah, you kind of think of it that way, but it's not, it's not what they used to do. So there was no kind of family-friendly events associated with Halloween until we kicked off into the kind of 20th century well and truly. There was some stuff that started happening. There was Halloween parades happening in some towns from about 1905 in America, but it wasn't yet the family-friendly holiday that we know it to be today. And from the early 1900s until about the 1930s, the Irish and the Scottish immigrants that came over brought a real intensity to the way that they approached this night where they could kind of get a bit wild and loose. And it wasn't just egging houses, it was throwing rocks through things. It was removing the steps from people's homes so that they would fall and trip and like hurt themselves.
Halloween of 1923 was labelled Black Halloween.
It was that bad.
Because things just got really out of hand, guys.
Yeah, they were burning things down. They were lighting fires, you know, setting things off. And
what a time to be alive.
It sounds like fun too, but... But even like putting soap bars in the streetcar rails and derailing streetcars, people were getting hurt.
People were taking apart wagons
and then
rebuilding them on someone's roof.
On rooftops.
Like that's commitment.
It really is. And I feel like we've lost, you know what, guys, we need to embrace the trick side of things a little bit heavier. There's trick or treat, there's Halloween.
But don't derail
cars or, you know,
and don't rebuild somebody's cart on their roof because it's a lot of effort.
It is a lot of effort.
And health and safety, again, they'll be all over that.
Yeah. So it was around the late kind of 1930s, after they'd been having all of this trouble with all of these kids doing this terrible shit, that all of the community groups, the police and, you know, the local churches and mayors and families, they got together and realized that if we don't start taking hold of this, because it's gotten its roots, it's definitely got its roots in here, we're going to keep having Halloween, it's going to keep happening. How can we make this a safer holiday? A holiday where not so much stuff gets fucking wrecked because of these rambunctious teenage boys, essentially.
Rambunctious boys will be boys.
Yeah, exactly.
So these little troublemakers continued to cause trouble, and I guess the authorities were like, yeah, we've got to take control back here. We need to sort this shit out.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1939, the phrase trick or treat was put into print for the first time, and it was done by a homemaker magazine.
Yeah.
And I can't think what it was called at this point, but there was an article in which a woman said that she did a open home. So I guess that would be the first kind of ghost house that you see in America.
Yeah, I guess, like, she basically was like, I opened my home up to the children on Halloween night, and offered them homemade sweets and treats as an exchange for not wrecking my house. Like, basically letting them come in. She was like, I don't want you kids to keep wrecking my house. I can't afford it. Here's some popcorn balls. That was what she had. She was like, this is all I've got.
And candied apples.
This is what I've got for you, okay? Just please stop wrecking my house. Stop moving my steps. Stop throwing shit through my windows. Here's some popcorn balls.
And
it worked.
She got no tricks.
It
got
worked.
no tricks that year. It worked
Smart
for her.
girl.
Candy killed the rowdy Halloween.
Yeah, it did. And then mass-produced candy became more popular, and they started putting on these events like costume parties and festivals and parades and bobbing for apples, holding game nights to keep the kids occupied so that they would not have the chance to go out and cause trouble.
Where did bobbing for apples come from?
Bobbing for apples was an interesting one. It actually, that whole association of apples with Halloween relates back to another Roman holiday. And this was a
Sorry,
holiday.
Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah. You derailed me there, you bitch.
Sorry.
All right. It came back from another holiday, and this was related to a goddess that they had there, and her name was Pomana, and she was the goddess of fruits and trees. Her symbol was the apple. So she became associated with Halloween around the same time that they was adopted with the other pagan festivals. And the association with apples was there all through the Middle Ages. And interestingly, apples had a huge part in the divination games that were played during Halloween. For some reason, they really believed that you could, I guess because the world's, like, the veil between those two worlds is meant to be at its thinnest, they were like, this is the time to, divine whatever you might want to know about your future lover. There are all these games that they used to play that involved apples and walnuts and mirrors and candles. Like, it was very...
Walnuts?
What? No, hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts.
My bad. So with hazelnuts, what you would do, and essentially these are like spells. Like, this is what people used to do.
Witchy.
Yeah, very witchy. But like young maiden women who wanted to know what their lover would be like, or whether their love was true, if they had a love affair with a young man, they were thinking about marrying him, you could both get a hazelnut, and then you keep track of which one is yours and which one is the other girl's. You throw them into the fire, and I think if it burnt at the same rate, then it was going to be a long and healthy love. If it exploded, he was cheating on you.
Right.
And another one with the apples was you do a long peel of the apple skin, and then you throw it over your left shoulder, either onto the floor or into a bowl of water. And whatever shape the apple peel...
They did this
on Charmed.
I
know.
When they went back and...
Yeah, that's right.
In the history of the witches. That was really interesting.
I
didn't know that was an actual thing.
That was a real thing. So whatever shape it took, that was the initial of your lover's Christian name.
Would it ever be a Q?
I mean, no. It's
always going to be
a C, no matter what you do. It's going to be a C. It's not going to be a T, is it? Because you're not throwing two pieces in there. So there was a lot of young maidens looking for a Carl or
Christopher
or a Christian. Well, they wanted Christians. All of them were after Christians, despite the fact that they're clearly practicing witchcraft. Like, that's exactly what that was. But perfectly acceptable in this Christian holiday.
Oh, fun.
And yet we burn them for throwing a few herbs together for menstruating women.
Damn.
Figure that out.
Well, look, it's not a holiday.
It's not. Yes.
You can only do these things on a holiday.
Yeah.
So at this point, we've completely lost track of where we are. But what we do know, let's do a quick recap.
Yeah.
Halloween. Originally, the Halloween in which we know started off as Samhain, which is a pagan holiday, which was rebranded. Celtic pagan holiday, which was rebranded by the church in order to convert pagans to Christianity.
And combined with Lemuria, which was the Roman pagan holiday that became All Saints or All Hallows Day.
Yep, and then we got All Hallows Eve, which Halloween, because everyone loves a rebrand.
Yes.
And then shit, then what happened?
Well, I mean, from there it was like sort of very religious focus for a long time with the souling.
Which is funny because there are a lot of
cakes.
religious people who are like, Halloween, no, it's devil worship.
I
It's
know.
this. No, it's not. You guys did it.
You guys were the ones who brought all these elements together and went, here's your new holiday. Like, that was your fucking plan. Just because you don't like how it turned out, just because you don't like that it turned secular, don't you bring your shit in here. But yeah, so it starts out there. It's very religious through the Middle Ages. It has more or less kind of combined with Guy Fawkes Day from about the 17th century onwards. And then it has a few elements of trick-or-treaty kind of stuff with souling and the beggars going around and performing in their costumes and causing a bit of trouble. Then it comes to the New World. It gets a lot more rambunctious, and trick-or-treat legit had this kind of origin of being like, if you don't give me sweets, I'm gonna fuck your shit up. That's what trick-or-treat was.
You're gonna come out of your house and there's gonna be a cut on your roof. And so that was trick-or-treating. And then
Jack-o'-lanterns were turnips. That's another thing we've covered.
Jack-o'-lanterns were turnips, and
costumes didn't come around until the 1930s.
masks, obviously, to hide your identity while you're causing trouble.
And partly from Guy Fawkes.
And partly from Guy Fawkes. And then America got some rowdy Scottish and Irish people who brought all of their shit with them. And then, like every good story, we go to Hollywood.
I know, right?
And Hollywood and the media turn Halloween into what we really do know it as today.